Alright, yeah, welcome back to some more Magic Duels. This week I'm going to be taking a look at a deck submitted to us by Carl Galbraith. I have done a fair few changes to this deck though, because it didn't have any Archangel cards in, and I thought there were a few that added to the deck strategy, as it were. So anyway, without further ado, this is Steve. Steve is an Orzhov Servo deck, and it's pretty cool. So, let's get into the deck. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So, basic idea of the deck is that it generates servos, pretty much a given, but it plays around things like Servo Schematic. Servo Schematic is a 2-mana artifact. Whenever it enters the battlefield or is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless Servo artifact token. So, whenever it enters or whenever it leaves, we get a Servo. We can make good use of that with things like Angelic Purge, which allows us to sacrifice a permanent. So we sacrifice the schematic and get ourselves a Servo as an additional cost for Angelic Purge, so we get additional value, which is pretty sweet. And then we get to exile artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Pretty cool. We also have things like Anointed Procession, which is pretty much #1 card in this game, as far as I'm concerned. 4 mana, 3 and a white for an enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. So, therefore, our Servo Schematic then enters the battlefield, gives us 2 servos, leaves the battlefield, gives us 2 servos, so we can double up on any kind of servo generating stuff. We then have Lords as well to make good use of the servos, so they become 2/2s. We also have things like Sram's Expertise to generate super amount of tokens, Angel of Invention, yet again another Servo Lord, that kind of thing. So let's go to the beginning of the deck, shall we? We've got 3 copies of Renegade Maps. These are in place of Evolving Wilds, essentially. And the reason why they're in place of Evolving Wilds is they work effectively the same way. They enter the battlefield tapped for 1 mana, and when we sacrifice them, we get to search our library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into our hand, and shuffle our library. When we sacrifice it, we trigger Revolt, because we are running Hidden Stockpile. So we sacrifice it on turn 2, grab whichever colour we are missing for the hidden stockpile, and then we play the stockpile and it comes in with the revolt already triggered. So we get a turn 2 stockpile with a 1/1 token, which is pretty good. Allows us to go with the sacrifice strategies and stuff like that. We also have a little bit of improvise in the deck as well, and we can tap the Renegade Maps in order to generate some mana that way as well. In addition to sacrificing artifacts and things like that. So it's really good for that kind of thing. Speaking of improvise and things like that, we've got Battle at the Bridge. So for black and X, we get to improvise, which means we can tap artifacts to add extra 1 colourless mana to our mana pool to cast this spell specifically. Target creature gets -X/-X until the end of the turn, and we gain X life. Really good for aggressive strategies. Really good at taking down indestructible creatures and stuff like that. The -X/-X will take its toughness to 0 or lower, so it's really nice for that kind of thing. And we gain tons of life, which allows us to stabilize our board. Really cool card. We then have Eily, Eternal Pilgrim, yet another way to gain life, but also to trigger Revolt. So for white and black, we get a 2/3 with Death Touch. We can pay 1 to sacrifice another creature and gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So if a creature was going to die, then we can sacrifice it and gain life off of it, gain some value back at the very least. Or we can use it to trigger Revolt by sacking a servo or anything like that. If we get to 30 life as well, we get to pay 1 a white and a black to sacrifice another creature, exile target non-land permanent, activate this only if you have at least 10 life or more than your starting life total. So if we've got 30 life, we can start exiling non-land permanents every single turn, just for 3 mana, so it just turns into a really, really decent Anguished Unmaking, essentially. The likelihood of getting here, not too great, but, you know, the option's there, so mess around with it. We've talked about Servo Schematic, so we won't go too far into that. So Hidden Stockpile, we can sacrifice creatures to scry, so when we get our Servo on turn 2 or turn 3, whenever we manage to trigger Revolt, we can actually swing in with the 1/1, sacrifice it with the Hidden Stockpile's ability to scry, and then trigger the Revolt at the end of turn in order to generate an untapped Servo. So we essentially get a Vigilance Servo, you could think of it like that. Which is pretty cool off of the Revolt. There is also a fun little thing you can do with the Anointed Procession as well. If you've got this on the board and Hidden Stockpile, whenever you sack a Servo and trigger Revolt, we actually get 2 servos back. So every single turn you can actually generate an extra servo while also scrying and generating an untapped. Servo at the same time. It's pretty sweet. Master Trinketeer is a 2 and a white creature, 3/2. Servos and Thopters you control get +1/+1. So it's our Servo Lord, essentially. We can generate a fair few of them, so it has decent value. Doesn't trigger on any of our other creatures, unfortunately, but Servos, we have plenty of them, so it's pretty nice for that. We also have, for 3 and a white, to generate 1 colourless Servo token. Yet again, it's 2 with Anointed Procession, so the value isn't that great until we get Procession down, but if we need an extra body on the ground in order to generate Revolt, perhaps, or just for blockers, then Trinketeer can do that for us. Not to forget that while the Trinketeer is on the battlefield, this is actually a 2/2, so the reason why it's decent value with the Procession is it's 2 2/2s for 4, which is essentially average profit for your mana cost that you're spending, essentially. You want 1 power for every 1 mana at the bare minimum, as far as value is concerned. We then have 3 copies of Nantucket Husk. Not entirely certain about these cards, but they do help quite a fair bit with a few strategies. I'm not sure if we've got anything better for our mana costs. Perhaps there is the 3 mana black one as well that gives you +1/+1 counters. That might also work, but this one gets you +2/+2 every single turn. So for 3 and a black, we get a 2/2. Allows us to sack creatures and get +2/+2 until the end of the turn, so we can sack our Servos to trigger Revolt. We can also sack our Priest of the Bloodright so that we don't have to have this downside. We'll get to that soon, but yeah, there's plenty of things that we can sacrifice. Our 1/1 Servos can be essentially sacrificed to generate extra power. If we swing in with everything, we can sack the blocked creatures so that we can push through more with the Nantucket Husk, that kind of thing. It's a really cool card. We then have Anguished Unmaking, 1 white and a black for instant speed. Exile target non-land permanent and you lose 3 life. Really good for just dealing with absolutely anything. God cards, tutelages, Ulamogs, that kind of thing. Gets rid of absolutely anything you can possibly imagine except for manlands. So Anguished Unmaking, super good here. The 3 life can often be quite bad for us, but we can generate life as well with things like Battle from the Bridge. And Shambling Vent, stuff like that. We then have 1 copy of Collective Effort, 1 and double white for a sorcery with Escalate. So this is a modal ability. For every single mode that we choose beyond the first, we have to tap a creature we control. We do generate servos, so we've got plenty of things to tap. So we can either choose from or include destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, so it's a 3 mana reprisal. Destroy target enchantment, take care of things like Sphinx's Tutelage. Anything that might have dealt with our planeswalkers, things like Imprison in the Moon, get rid of that, get our planeswalkers back, or even cast outs. And finally, we also get a +1/+1 counter on each creature a target player controls, so all of our servos can get an extra counter on them. Super value if we can get that set up. Only 1 copy because it is double white, it's a little bit difficult, because we do mostly want to make sure that we've got double black for Liliana, because Liliana can win the game on the spot. We'll get to that in a second. In fact, we'll get to it now because we've walked along Angelic Purge enough. So, Liliana, the Last Hope. 1 and double black for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. When you tick her up +1, you get to give a creature -2/-1. So that could either get rid of the power off of a creature, make it a little bit smaller and more manageable, or if it's got 1 toughness, we can just kill it. So, Thopter tokens, Servo tokens, a fair few red creatures, that kind of thing. Just straight up die to Liliana. It really limits our options for our opponent as far as what they can play down without Liliana just straight up taking care of it. A -2, kind of relevant in a way. You get to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So if maybe our Iverson or our Angel of Inventions died, we could minus Liliana in order to get them back, get our Servo Lords back into play, that kind of thing. The -7, though, is the thing that you should always be aiming for when you go for the Liliana, because it just wins on the spot most of the time. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. So if we have no zombies on the field at the end step, we get 2 zombies. We get 4 if we've got Anointed Procession. This emblem gets stupid with an Anointed Procession on the board. And then if those 2 zombies are still there at the end of our next turn, then we get 4 zombies, 8 with Anointed Procession, and then if we get, every single turn, just gets exponentially out of hand. It's pretty funny. Talked about Procession. Sir Arm's Expertise, Creates 3 servo tokens for 2 and 2 white. That's 6 with Anointed Procession. And then we get to cast a card with convert mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So we get to cast our planeswalkers, our removal, our hidden stockpiles, anything that we want really. Most of our deck is below 3 mana, so there's a good chance that we actually get to use the secondary ability. Should be noted that if we go with the Angelic Purge, the additional cost is still something we have to pay. So just bear that in mind. If you do go Sram's Expertise into Angelic Purge, you still have to sacrifice something. So you do get your servos first before that happens, so you can sack one of the servos if you want to do it that way. Then have Gideon, ally of Zendikar, our planeswalker / also kind of servo lord here. 2 and 2 white for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. His +1 allows us to make him into a 5/5 creature that all damage is prevented on him, so we can swing him for 5 every single turn, pretty much unpunished. Got to watch out for Blessed Alliance and things like that, so you probably do want to swing in with a servo all the same. But that 5/5 has to be answered pretty quickly, or it needs to be chump blocked pretty consistently. The 0 allows us to put a 2/2 White Knight ally token onto the battlefield. That's 2 of them with Anointed Procession. So that can be really good. It allows us to go a little bit wide. Maybe if we have a Westvale Abbey on the board, we get there a lot quicker. The -4 though is the Servo Lord side of it. We get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. Really nice with the servos because it just makes them permanently 2/2s for the rest of the game. And all we have to do is tick up once with Gideon and keep him on 5 loyalty in order to get that emblem. So it is a little bit of a setup kind of play, but really worthwhile and nice little payoff. Angel of Invention is a 3 and double white, 5 total mana for a 2/1 with Flying, Vigilance and Lifelink. Really good stats right there. It's also got Fabricate 2 as well, so when this creature enters the battlefield we can either put 2/1/1 counters on it, or we can make 2 servo tokens instead. We pretty much always want to go with the servo tokens, and broken record, Anointed Procession makes it 4 servo tokens so we can get even more value. Other creatures you control also get +1/+1 as long as Angel of Invention is on the board, so those servos are actually 2/2s, so we can get some super value there. Really good stuff. Archangel Iverson is our protection from board wipes. We can kind of get back from a board wipe relatively easily, but we shouldn't always have to. Archangel Iverson, 3 and 2 white for a 4/4 flash Flying Vigilance, which means we can cast it at instant speed on our opponent's turn in response to a board wipe. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible until the end of the turn. So it protects us from a little bit of removal, doesn't protect us from Languish or Tragic Arrogance, but Planar Outburst, Radiant Flames, and general targeted removal can protect us from there as well. When a non-angel creature you control dies, you get to transform Archangel Iverson at the beginning of your next upkeep. So she becomes a 4/4 and turns into a 6/5, flying. When she transforms, deals 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. Most likely you don't want her to flip, so you got to be really careful with that kind of thing. But if she does flip, there's not really a great deal we can do about it. She's a Radiant Flames on a stick when she flips over there, and she deals the damage to an opponent as well. Ready to swing in for virtually 9 if you count the damage that she does to opponents. We then have Priest of the Bloodright. Really cool little card in this deck. I do like it. It's nice to see a few Origins cards come back into favour on occasion. So, 3 and 2 black for 5 mana total. We get a 2/2. Terrible value. However, it enters the battlefield and you get a 5/5 black demon token with flying onto the battlefield. You get 2 5/5s with Anointed Procession. At the beginning of your upkeep though, you do lose 2 life, so you do need a way to get rid of the Priest. So, ways to get rid of the Priest are either Angelic Purge, use it as a sacrifice option for the additional cost. You can also use the nantucket Husk, which I believe is why they are in here, so they are good value for that kind of thing. So, get the nantucket Husk on the board and you can just straight up sack the Priest in order to get rid of this downside. Next we've got Planar Outburst. This is our board wipe, our panic button, whatever you want to call it. 3 and 2 white to destroy all non-land creatures. So if our opponent gets out of hand, then we can just wipe the board and start all over. We can kind of go a little bit wide. Relatively easy with Planar Outburst. After the Planar Outburst, should I say. So it's not too bad, but it's here for if it's not going our way, essentially. We can also Awaken for 4, which means we can turn a land into a 4/4 if we pay this mana cost instead of this one, which is pretty sweet, and we can swing in with that land straight after we wipe the board, so if our opponent's on 4 life and we've got Planar Outburst in hand, we can pretty much just win on the spot with Planar Outburst. Pretty cool. Then have Obnixilis Reignited. Nice little decent card advantage engine, pretty much the reason why it's in here. We do run out of cards quite quickly in this deck. For some reason, despite having a reasonable mana cost, we actually do end up with a low amount of answers, so Obnixilis allows us to draw into extra answers. He also has Murder on a Stick with his -3, and his -8 allows us to get an emblem with a whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So every turn cycle, our opponent's losing 4 life from this emblem. Pretty sweet. If they are drawing cards, then it is even worse for them, so this is a control player's worst nightmare, essentially. So yeah, it's really good for that kind of thing. Marionette Master plays very well into servos, and as well, if we have the nantucket Husk on board, we can maybe kill our opponent on the spot with Marionette Master. So for 4 and 2 black, we've got a 1/3 with Fabricate 3, so we can generate either 3 servos or put 3 counters. Both of those viable strategies depending on the board state that we currently have. So, whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So, if we went for the servos, whenever a servo dies, essentially, they lose 1 life. If we went for the counters, whenever a servo dies, they lose 4 life instead. So, this is why I'm saying that this Fabricate option is not always a one-sided thing. We might want to actually make her into a 4 power creature so that the servos deal 4 damage when they die. So you can imagine this with a nantucket Husk already on the board. We just sacrifice our entire board, dealing 4 for every single servo that we sacrifice, plus making a super gigantic nantucket Husk at the same time. Pretty cool. We then have Sorin, Grim Nemesis. So for 4, a white and a black, we've got a 6 loyalty planeswalker. We can +1 to reveal the top card of our library, put that card into our hand, and then each opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. So if we get our Marionette Master, for example, off of the top of it, our opponent loses 6 life. If we get Obnixilis, they lose 5 life. If we get a land, they lose 0 life. So it can be a little bit hit or miss, but we do have quite a higher converted mana cost. We pretty much average around 3, so you can imagine this is a +1, deal 3, draw a card kind of thing. The minus ability is really good as well. It allows us to take care of any problems on the board as well as planeswalkers. Sorin Grim Nemesis deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker and you gain X life, so we can take out whatever we want. -5 allows us to keep the Sorin on the battlefield while dealing with most creatures and gaining us a fair bit of life, so if we're against an aggressive strategy then we get to pick up the pieces from there. The -9 not very likely to come into play, but we get to put a number of 1/1 black vampire tokens with lifelink onto the battlefield equal to the highest life total among all players. Most likely going to be our opponent. Who knows? We'll see. Finally, we got Herald of Anguish. Just really put this card in here for the option to play with it, to be honest. I'm not sure if it's actually that good, but, you know, it's time to play with cards that we don't normally play. So for 5 and 2 black, 7 mana total, we have a 5/5 with flying, but it does also have improvise, so we can tap artifacts to make this a little bit cheaper. This can come out for as little as 2 mana if we've got 5 artifacts to tap. At the beginning of each of our end step, each opponent discards a card, so we can pretty much hurt our opponent's card advantage train. Really good for control matchups, although I imagine that our opponent has an answer for this. But if we can keep our opponent low on cards and keep us high on cards, that's usually a decent way to win the game on the spot. We can also sacrifice artifacts as well to give target creature -2/-2. So it's a nice little bit of removal, a little bit hit and miss, but we can actually use this to sacrifice our servo schematics and generate servos that way as well. So it's nice. It's nice. That's essentially the deck. Let's go on to the mana base. We've got 7 plains and 6 swamps. We've got our Renegade Maps to go and fetch for these guys, so that's pretty good. Shambling Vent is a white-black tap land, but we can also pay 1 white, 1 black to make it a 2/3 white and black elemental creature token with lifelink, so we can regenerate our life relatively easy as long as the board is clear. We can keep swinging in with this. It's also a decent jump blocker as well for little creatures, and can often slow our opponent down. Westvale Abbey is a colourless mana land. We can pay 5 and tap it to pay 1 life, and put a 1/1 white and black human cleric token onto the battlefield. And if we've got 5 creatures, we can actually pay 5, tap it, sacrifice those creatures, really plays into Marionette Master as well. We get to transform Westvale Abbey and untap it, so you get Armandal, the Profane Prince. You've got to watch out with this card though, because your opponent can remove it and then you've effectively lost 5 creatures on a land. But if they have no answer for it, then you've got yourself a 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible with haste that you get to swing in with right at the very beginning of the sacrifice. All of the stuff resolving. It's pretty sweet. We then have 2 Isolated Chapels coming into play tapped unless you control a plains or a swamp. We've got plenty of basics to make sure that always happens. Finally, we've got 1 Rogue's Passage. Allows us to make our Armandal unblockable, maybe our Herald of Anguish unblockable, or even our 5/5 flying tokens, that kind of thing. We've got a lot of high-hitting creatures, so 1 copy of this, pretty decent. Nice little utility land. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's deck tech. If you did enjoy the look of the deck and you want to see the matches, then the video should already be out for you, if you want to go check that out. Otherwise, you can hit like and subscribe, and if you hit that bell icon as well, you'll get notifications when the videos go live. I do hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.